A Dalton home that she leased to Mayor Tiffany Henyard has filed eviction papers. She says Henyard has not paid her rent, and now she wants her.
South suburban politician Tiffany Henyard appears to have lost control of both.
The small town of Dalton, Illinois, home to just 200 residents, has found itself at the center of an escalating maelstrom of controversy, largely tied to the tumultuous tenure of Mayor Tiffany Henyard. A community that once sought steady leadership now grapples with scandal after scandal, many tied directly to Henyard's contentious actions and decisions. Among these controversies is her appointment of a police chief who shockingly lacks the legal qualifications to serve as a police officer. Just one example of the dysfunction and outrage that have come to define her administration. From the moment she assumed office, Henyard's tenure has been marked by accusations of corruption, financial mismanagement, and political favoritism. Detractors argue that her leadership style is less about governance and more about consolidating power at all costs, regardless of the consequences for her struggling town. Henyard's detractors point to allegations of embezzling taxpayer money, using township resources for personal gain, and making appointments that seem more rooted in loyalty than legality or competence. Her decision to appoint an unqualified individual to one of the most critical roles in town, police chief, has sent shockwaves through Dalton, further eroding public trust in her ability to lead. The controversial appointment is emblematic of what many describe as Henyard's disregard for proper governance and due process. Residents and critics alike are questioning how such a significant oversight could occur, particularly when public safety in Dalton is already a major concern, with increasing reports of delayed emergency responses, understaffed departments, and resource mismanagement. The choice of an unqualified police chief feels like a deliberate act of negligence rather than an unfortunate mistake. Henyard has offered little in the way of explanation, choosing instead to deflect criticism as politically motivated attacks from opponents who she claims are bent on seeing her fail. Yet, for residents living with crumbling infrastructure, rising crime rates, and a local government mired in chaos, such deflections provide little comfort or accountability. Critics argue that Henyard's priorities seem misaligned with the needs of her community. Instead of focusing on stabilizing Dalton's deteriorating economy, addressing public safety concerns, and repairing strained relations between residents and their local government, her administration is frequently embroiled in disputes and controversies. Allegations of using taxpayer dollars for personal luxury have further fueled frustrations, with some accusing her of treating public office as a means of self-enrichment. Lavish expenditures, questionable policies, and high-profile public outbursts have made Henyard a lightning rod for criticism not just locally, but beyond Dalton's borders, where media coverage has turned the small town into an unlikely political spectacle. Henyard's staunchest supporters, however, maintain that she is the victim of an orchestrated campaign to discredit her, pointing to what they perceive as a double standard in how her leadership is scrutinized compared to her predecessors. They argue that as Dalton's first female mayor, Henyard is facing heightened opposition from political insiders, unwilling to accept a change in the town's power dynamics. Still, this narrative does little to sway many residents who are growing increasingly frustrated with the apparent dysfunction surrounding her administration. Henyard's combative leadership style, characterized by fiery speeches and public confrontations, has only deepened divisions within the community, leaving many to question whether reconciliation and progress are even possible under her leadership. Even more alarming are reports of outside agencies, including the FBI, investigating Henyard's administration. Speculation about financial improprieties and abuse of power has fueled rumors that her legal troubles could escalate significantly if evidence of misconduct is uncovered. The consequences could prove devastating, not only for Henyard but for Dalton, which is already struggling to navigate its many challenges. For a town of just 200, the stakes couldn't be higher, with residents wondering whether their local government is capable of serving their needs amid such turmoil. And ultimately, Henyard's story is one of stark contrasts: a mayor who promised transformation but instead appears mired in controversy, a town yearning for stability but swept into chaos, and a leadership dynamic that teeters on the edge of collapse. As Dalton continues to make headlines for reasons that overshadow its aspirations for progress, the questions persist. Can Henyard rally her administration and deliver on the promises she once made? Or will the mounting scandals and widespread distrust ultimately mark the end of her political career.
Well, for the first time in many weeks, Dalton trustees and Mayor Tiffany Henyard held a public meeting together, but not at Village.
Ronald Burge, the controversial figure handpicked by Mayor Tiffany Henyard to lead the Dalton Police Department, has been officially deemed inactive by the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board. In simpler terms, he hasn't met the state's basic requirements to wear a badge, carry a gun, or manage a police force. Yet Henyard remains adamant in her support, refusing to budge on her decision to appoint him. How did this happen, and why is Henyard so determined to keep Burge in such a powerful position despite mounting objections? This latest controversy is just another chapter in the ongoing drama that has engulfed Dalton, Illinois, a small town whose governance has become a hotbed of scandal and intrigue under Henyard's leadership. For those familiar with Tiffany Henyard's reign on the mayor, Burge's contentious appointment is par for the course. Henyard has already built a reputation for pushing boundaries, bending rules, and disregarding protocol when it suits her agenda. From allegedly misusing taxpayer money for extravagant parties, to employing police officers as personal security, and even donning theatrical outfits reminiscent of gangster movies like New Jack City during public meetings, Henyard has cultivated a flair for drama that often overshadows the seriousness of her position. However, as entertaining as her antics might be to onlookers, they carry significant repercussions for the residents of Dalton, a community struggling with critical issues like poverty, infrastructure decay, and rising crime. The Burge controversy began in September when Henyard announced his appointment as the new chief of police. Almost immediately, the move was met with backlash from the Dalton Village Board of Trustees, who argued that the mayor didn't have the unilateral authority to make such an appointment without their formal approval. Despite their objections, Henyard forged ahead, effectively bypassing the checks and balances meant to prevent this kind of overreach. Critics saw her actions as a blatant disregard for governance protocols, a recurring theme in her administration. Burge credentials, or lack thereof, only added fuel to the fire. As it turned out, he didn't meet the minimum qualifications required by Illinois law to serve as a police officer, let alone lead an entire department. According to state guidelines, police officers must complete rigorous training, maintain certifications, and remain in good standing with the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board. Burge's inactive status indicates that he failed to meet these requirements, raising serious questions about his ability to effectively and lawfully perform his duties as police chief. This revelation has heightened tensions between Henyard, the village board, and a growing number of frustrated residents. Despite the uproar, Henyard has stood by her decision, defending Burge as the right person for the job and dismissing critics as politically motivated adversaries looking for any excuse to undermine her authority. But her defiance has done little to assuage concerns. Opponents argue that her insistence on keeping Burge in the role is not about leadership or public safety, but rather a calculated power play to consolidate her influence over Dalton's police force. By installing a loyal ally in such a pivotal position, Henyard could potentially use the police department to further her own political agenda, a dangerous precedent for any elected official. The implications of this conflict are far-reaching, not just for Burge and Henyard, but for Dalton as a whole. Residents and local leaders worry that the drama and dysfunction emanating from the mayor's office are eroding public trust in local government, creating divisions within the community and distracting from pressing issues that require urgent attention. With Dalton already grappling with financial instability, an underfunded school system, and deteriorating public services, the last thing the town needs is yet another political circus. Adding to the tension is the fact that outside entities, including the Illinois Attorney General's office and the FBI, are reportedly keeping a close watch on Henyard's administration. Investigations into her financial dealings, alleged misuse of public resources, and other controversies could potentially result in serious legal consequences for the embattled mayor. While Henyard has repeatedly denied any wrongdoing and portrayed herself as the target of a politically motivated smear campaign, the growing list of allegations against her has left many wondering how much longer she can weather the storm.
The landlord showed up here to see her tenant in person after she says Henyard has been dodging both her and rent payments for months.
The opposition to Ronald Burge's appointment as Dalton police chief reached such a boiling point that the village board of trustees took the matter to court in an effort to block it. For a moment, it seemed they had succeeded. A judge issued a temporary restraining order preventing Burge from serving as police chief without the board's approval. However, in true Tiffany Henyard fashion, the mayor was not about to back down. Determined to push her agenda forward, Henyard continued to challenge the board, leading to a highly contentious and chaotic village board meeting. Ultimately, The judge ruled that Burge could serve as interim police chief for 30 days while Henyard and the board worked to determine a permanent replacement, seemingly giving her a temporary win. But the drama didn't end there. What followed was a bombshell revelation that shifted the entire narrative. Days after the court's ruling, the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board delivered a formal letter to Henyard, dropping an explosive piece of information. Ronald Burge was not legally qualified to serve as a police officer, let alone lead a department. The reason? Burge had failed to complete the necessary paperwork and training required to maintain his certification as a law enforcement officer. Even more alarming, Burge had not passed a requalification shooting exam, a mandatory basic requirement for carrying a firearm, since 2021. The implications of this discovery were staggering. Not only was Burge unqualified to assume the responsibilities of police chief, but he was also legally barred from carrying a weapon. For many in Dolton, this revelation validated their concerns and reinforced the belief that Henyard's decision-making was reckless and self-serving. Critics accused the mayor of prioritizing political loyalty over qualifications, alleging that her move to appoint Burge was more about consolidating her power than addressing the needs of the community, Burgess said. Henyard, however, continued to double down, defending her decision to appoint Burge and dismissing the board's and critics' concerns as politically motivated. She maintained that the challenges to Burge's appointment were part of a broader effort to undermine her leadership and block her from executing her vision for Dolton. Yet, with the letter from the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board now public, even some of Henyard's staunchest supporters began to question her judgment. Dr. Dale was a former member of Henyard's tenure, and he is a moderate Republican, meaning he still kept his position of the director, but very rarely spends time outside the council. Developments only added to the growing list of security detail and mounting tensions with the board have created an increasingly polarized and contentious environment in Dolton. Her supporters argue that she is being unfairly targeted for standing her ground, while critics see her as a leader whose actions reflect arrogance, poor judgment, and a blatant disregard for accountability. As the fallout from the Burge controversy continues, it raises broader concerns about leadership, governance, and transparency in Dolton. With public trust eroding and new controversies emerging, the situation has left the town's residents grappling with uncertainty and frustration. Meanwhile, the pressure on Henyard to explain her actions and rebuild credibility continues to grow. Whether this latest chapter in the Henyard saga will lead to lasting change or simply deepen the divisions in Dolton remains to be seen. But one thing is clear, the mayor and her administration are under the microscope, and the stakes have never been higher.
Word one, it says 100%, 100% of one, 100% to who? I mean, that could be a lot of different things. What's the administrative cost? When's it going to start? When's it going to end? Just literally.
Let's take a moment to unpack this. The police chief, the individual entrusted with overseeing law enforcement for an entire town, can't even legally carry a firearm. It's almost unfathomable to think that a person in such an important role would lack the basic qualifications to do the job. It's like hiring a lifeguard who can't swim or a chef who doesn't know how to cook. Yet, despite this glaring issue, Mayor Henyard is standing firm behind her decision to appoint Ronald Burge. So why, you might ask, is she so determined to keep him on? That's where things start to get even more complicated. Critics have long pointed to a troubling and persistent pattern in Henyard's appointments, suggesting that her choices for key positions aren't based on merit, but rather on loyalty, something that raises serious red flags. One resident captured this feeling perfectly in a blunt comment. She hires and recruits people like a mob boss, and truth be told, it's a sentiment that's difficult to dismiss. Henyard's track record of placing individuals in powerful roles who have questionable backgrounds or who seem more interested in appeasing her than in serving the community is becoming an increasingly concerning pattern. Rehiring police officers with dubious pasts to appointing political allies who appear to be more loyal to her than to the town itself, Henyard's choices have consistently sparked distrust and suspicion. This behavior undermines the credibility of her leadership, leaving many to wonder whether she values political allegiance over professionalism and competency. Henyard's defenders might argue that she's simply making bold, unconventional choices, but the concerns about her leadership style are becoming undeniable. Quote, "The continued scrutiny of her actions, especially after the Burge debacle, highlights a disturbing trend. Her appointments are raising alarm bells for residents who feel that their town's future is being jeopardized by a lack of transparent decision-making and an insular, almost self-serving administration. As the controversy deepens, the question remains, will Henyard change course, or will her reliance on loyalty continue to put Dolton's future at risk? In Burge's case, the concerns go far beyond his lack of qualifications. His history in local law enforcement is long and deeply controversial. Burge has served as police chief in several nearby towns, including Dixmoor and Harvey, but his tenure in those positions was plagued by lawsuits and allegations of misconduct. In fact, Burge has been named in at least 4 lawsuits in recent years, many of which involved accusations of political and employment retaliation. It's hard to argue that Henyard was selecting from the best of the best with this appointment. But here's the kicker. Henyard doesn't seem to care. To her, Burge is the right man for the job, and she's prepared to defend that choice at all costs, even if it means dragging the town through an endless series of court battles. And let's not forget the larger scandal looming over all of this. Henyard herself is currently under investigation by the FBI for alleged misuse of Dalton's finances. The accusations are jaw-dropping. Claims of taxpayer money funding first-class travel, luxury shopping sprees, and even an $85,000 party featuring R&B singer Keisha Cole. It's a picture of extravagance that starkly contrasts with the town's struggles. Unsurprisingly, Dalton residents are outraged. The village is drowning in over $3 million of debt, yet their mayor appears more focused on personal indulgence and political games than addressing the town's urgent problems. One resident, Antoinette, expressed her frustration during an interview. "She is really ruining the town of Dalton. We used to have a lot of trees here. She's taking them down." It's a simple observation, but a telling one, reflecting a widespread sense of loss and disillusionment. Others haven't held back their opinions either. Resident bluntly compared Henyard to a South American dictator, saying, "It's Venezuela. Isn't that what they're doing out there with President Nicolás Maduro? His face is everywhere, like I'm the dictator," with massive billboards featuring Henyard's face plastered all over town. The parallels are hard to ignore. Self-promotion, it seems, is one area where she spares no expense. While Henyard might bask in the spotlight, it's the people of Dalton who are bearing the brunt of her antics. The town's finances are in disarray, local businesses are struggling to survive, and the police department is in chaos. With Burge's controversial appointment, the situation is only spiraling further out of control. Take, for instance, the letter from the Illinois Law Enforcement Training and Standards Board. It didn't just highlight Burge's lack of qualifications. It strongly urged Henyard to remove him from public service altogether until he completed the necessary paperwork and training. Did Henyard heed the warning? Of course not. The fallout has been significant. The Board of Trustees is now preparing to take the issue back to court. Trustee Jason House, one of Henyard's most outspoken critics, has stated that they plan to use the Law Enforcement Board's letter as evidence to argue that Burge shouldn't even serve in an interim capacity. This is just the latest chapter in the ongoing legal battles between Henyard and the Board of Trustees, a feud that shows no signs of ending anytime soon. What is she so determined to keep Burge in a position he's clearly not qualified for? Some theories have surfaced, and they're not exactly flattering. A commenter on a local news story shared this perspective. "I've been saying this about all of Tia's appointments. If the state of Illinois lists someone as inactive, they can't serve as an officer. Lacey had the same inactive status within Illinois." The commenter is referencing Liz Lacey, Henyard's previous pick for police chief, who had a similarly questionable background and was eventually forced out of the role. Lacey proposed a critical question. Is Henyard deliberately surrounding herself with individuals who are easier to control? By appointing people who owe their positions to her, she might be ensuring their loyalty. The Wall Street Journal called the session, quote, "revolutionary," unquote. After all, they likely wouldn't hold these roles without her support. Another theory suggests that Henyard thrives on controversy and chaos. Over time, she's built a reputation as a mayor who embraces drama, from attending meetings in attention-grabbing outfits to blasting Rihanna's "Be Better Have My Money" over loudspeakers, or even threatening to arrest her political opponents. Henyard appears to enjoy keeping the public eye firmly on her. Perhaps keeping Burge in place is just another way for her to command the spotlight. Whatever her motivations, one thing is certain: Henyard's leadership has taken a toll on Dalton. The town's residents are growing weary of the constant drama, legal battles, and financial mismanagement. They're looking for a mayor who prioritizes solving their problems, not creating new ones. With the next election on the horizon, Henyard may be in for a wake-up call. Trustee Jason House, her challenger in the mayoral race, has made it clear that he's ready to clean up the mess he believes Henyard has left behind. House told the Chicago Tribune, "We look forward to Election Day and hope the residents will vote for us to continue the work we've been doing." His message of accountability and reform is likely to resonate with many Dalton residents eager for change. But Henyard isn't backing down. She's already announced her bid for re-election, and if there's one thing she's shown, it's that she's a fighter. In a bold statement to her supporters, she declared, "Just like Trump, I'm coming in on a landslide." Whether that prediction holds true remains to be seen, but one thing is certain: Dalton's upcoming election promises to be a pivotal and unforgettable moment in the town's history. Where does this leave us? For now, Burge remains the interim police chief, but his future and Henyard's both hang in the balance. Only time will tell. What are your thoughts? Share your perspective below. Until next time, stay tuned and stay informed.